It all started one rainy afternoon in the midst of rainy season. I started to notice that my workstation, other than the bad cable management, is actually quite boring. So I bought a glass tank. For about a month, it just sat there on my desk, empty. I couldn't decide what to put in until finally, inspiration hit, and I masterfully sketched out my vision for the Vivarium. As you can clearly see from my expert sketch, I planned a central puddle with a rock island as the focal point. The eastern and western banks would be lush with plants, and grass would cover the front. In the back, there'd be a mossy cliff, perfect for creatures to cross. There'd also be branches all over, creating a slope for the eyes to follow along and a path for the creatures inside. To start, we'll first need to check our budget as the economy isn't exactly on our side. Other than the tank, we'll need gravel for drainage, sand for the puddle, dried moss, a product placement. Wait, no, we're not sponsored yet. A mesh cover, a light, a background cover, and a cooling fan. First, I applied the black background. This should have been easy, but it took me embarrassingly long to figure out. So with a little video magic, here's the finished look. Next, we add the drainage layer. We'll be needing lots and lots of it. Now, I underestimated how much gravel I need for this specific build, so I had to scavenge some extra stones from outside to make up for it. After that, I made space for the puddle. We'll need at least an inch of drainage layer to ensure the substrate is above the water level. We then placed the barrier and added the sand. This is essentially a finer drainage layer. I also tossed in some wood branches I found outside. They can act as food for various soil critters and help with moisture retention, which benefits plant growth. And as they decay, they will slowly release nutrients. I collected soil from my garden, but with all the rain, it's basically mud at this point, so overall it was tougher to shape it to our desired landscape. But nonetheless, we continue. It also didn't help the transition from soil to sand as it started to stick to the soil, but over time, all the moving creatures inside will help us fix this. I'm also shaping this to ensure the back area has more elevation, giving it a more natural transition to the cliff at the back. We then move back to shaping the sand where our rock island will rest on. I'm still unsure with the decision to go with the white sand, as over time, the water will probably turn black with all the tannins released by the decaying wood. At this point, only time will tell. After shaping the landscape, it was time to hardscape. We'll start with a branch first. We'll strategically place this to act as a bridge between the banks, allowing us a good view of the creatures that decide to cross this. And then something that really draws the eye. No. And check this out. The rock we picked up already has critters inside. They'll be our first inhabitants inside the tank. This will be our rock island. It'll serve as the centerpiece of this vivarium. We'll lower it right in the middle of the sand and gently tuck it in. With that done, it's time to add the final touches. The bigger rocks will serve as shelter for the dwellers as it creates nooks and crannies that can serve as hiding spots. The smaller rocks scattered here and there creates variation in the texture to make it appear more natural. The dried moss serves similar purposes. In addition, it'll aid in moisture retention, create humidity pockets, and will break down over time, contributing to the nutrient cycle within the tank. It also has an aesthetic appeal to it, making the tank look lush by giving it a forest floor appearance. And now it's time to add the water. Despite the plant puddle being only an inch tall, check out how much water I'm putting in. The puddle will serve to maintain the humidity, and small animals like snails and isopods might also find food sources or hiding spots around the edges of the puddle, creating an interactive space for them. For the cover, I went with a cheap DIY magnetic mesh screen I found online. This is originally meant to be a mesh screen for windows, but it fits for our purpose as well. This is probably my second most hated part of the build as it requires precision and skill, which I feel like I'm lacking. After a lot of measuring and cutting and clamping, we finally have a cover. We then have to wipe the top of the tank clean to ensure the magnetic strip can stick properly. It wasn't as straightforward as I hoped it would be, as I had to scrape off some silicone that's protruding. It's not perfect, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I also added a CPU cooling fan at the top for ventilation, because managing airflow is one of the big challenges with a top-down Vivarium. At first glance, the tank might seem barren, but if you take a closer look, you'll see that life is already beginning to take hold. This is a unicorn snail, the one we spotted earlier. Unicorn snails play a vital role as caretakers of a vivarium's ecosystem, acting as natural decomposers, algae eaters, and soil aerators. They help keep the environment clean and support healthy plant growth. Their activity promotes balance and stability within the ecosystem. Plus, unicorn snails serve as helpful bioindicators, providing insight into the overall health of the vivarium. When they thrive, it's a good sign that the habitat is in great shape. While the unicorn snail does its part in keeping the vivarium clean, it's not working alone. Meet the isopods, another vital member of our cleanup crew. Like the snails, these little crustaceans are expert decomposers, breaking down organic waste and returning nutrients to the soil. But their role goes even further. They're constantly burrowing through the substrate, aerating the soil and creating a healthier environment for our plants. And just like the unicorn snail, isopods help manage the mold and fungi, keeping the ecosystem in balance. Together, these tiny workers ensure our vivarium stays healthy and thriving. To finish off this build, I added plants found growing in my garden. It doesn't look like much now, but over time, I hope it'll become as lush as it did in my sketch as this series progresses. Wait, are those parasites?